The Ninth Circuit issued a final decision regarding ammunition background checks and related issues.
House of Representatives may change the way gun owners buy ammunition.
The Ninth Circuit upheld a district court injunction enforcing background checks to purchase ammunition.
The Better Business Bureau has a consumer alert about an online ammo shop.
Ammunition background check regime infringes on the fundamental right to keep and bear arms.
This is interesting because it's not because of what they sell, but because of how they sell it.
A piece of legislation just dropped in Congress that would make it illegal to have ammunition shipped to your front door. Not state legislation, federal. And the implications go far beyond just convenience. This could fundamentally reshape how every single round of ammunition is bought and sold in America. Here's what nobody's talking about yet. This bill doesn't just regulate online ammo sales. It creates an entirely new federal licensing system, mandates face-to-face transactions for every single purchase, and perhaps most concerning of all, it establishes a reporting mechanism that would flag you to federal authorities and local law enforcement simply for buying what many consider a normal amount of ammunition. We're talking about 1,000 rounds. That's one case. That's a weekend at the range for a lot of people. Now, before anyone dismisses this as just another bill that'll die in committee, there's a strategic reason this legislation keeps getting reintroduced, and understanding that strategy is crucial for anyone who cares about this issue. So let's break down exactly what this bill does, what it means for you, and why the timing of its reintroduction matters more than most people realize. The legislation is called the Stop Online Ammunition Sales Act, and it's officially designated as H.R. 7166 in the current Congress. This isn't a brand new concept. It's actually a rehash of a bill that was introduced about 3 years ago. But here's the thing. When bills get reintroduced, it's rarely just for show. There's a method to this. The primary sponsors are Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman from New Jersey and Congressman Kweisi Mfume from Maryland. They're calling this a common sense measure to place safeguards on online ammunition sales. That phrase, common sense, you're going to hear it a lot when we discuss this legislation because it's the framing being used in every press release and public statement. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Will this bill pass right now? Given the current makeup of Congress, probably not. But that's not actually the point. What's happening here is strategic groundwork. Legislators introduce bills like this to gauge support, to see who signs on as co-sponsors, and to build a foundation for future pushes. Every piece of legislation that doesn't go anywhere still serves a purpose. It's a temperature check. It's a way to identify allies and opponents. And most importantly, it positions the bill for rapid movement if political winds shift after midterm elections or future presidential races. So dismissing this because it won't pass today misses the bigger picture entirely. Let's get into the meat of what this legislation actually proposes. The full text makes 3 major changes to federal law, and each one represents a significant departure from how things currently work. The first major change involves licensing of ammunition dealers. Under current law, many ammunition sellers, particularly online retailers, operate without a federal firearms license. They don't need one because they're selling ammunition, not firearms. This bill would change that completely. If passed, anyone who wants to sell ammunition would need to obtain an FFL, just like gun dealers are required to have today. This is essentially taking the California model and applying it nationwide. The regulatory burden alone would reshape the entire ammunition retail landscape. The second major change is arguably the centerpiece of the entire bill, and it's the one that would most directly impact everyday buyers. The legislation would require all ammunition sales to occur through face-to-face transactions. No more adding items to your cart online and having cases of ammunition delivered to your doorstep. Instead, a licensed dealer, now required to have an FFL under this framework, would need to verify your identity in person by examining a government-issued photo identification. Think about what that means practically. Ammunition purchases would essentially become like firearm purchases in terms of physical verification requirements. The convenience factor that has made online ammunition sales so popular would simply cease to exist. For people in rural areas, for people who buy in bulk to save money, for competitive shooters who go through significant quantities, this represents a fundamental change to how they've been doing business for years. The third major change introduces bulk sale reporting requirements, and this is where things get particularly interesting. Under this provision, if a licensed ammunition dealer sells more than 1,000 rounds to an unlicensed person within 5 consecutive business days, They would be required to prepare a report of multiple sales. That report would go to the Attorney General and to state or local law enforcement. Let's put that in perspective. 1,000 rounds sounds like a lot to someone who doesn't shoot regularly, but for anyone who trains seriously, who competes, or who simply likes to buy in bulk to save money, 1,000 rounds is nothing. That's a case. Many standard cases of ammunition contain more than 1,000 rounds. You can easily go through that amount in a couple of range sessions. Under this bill, that purchase would trigger a federal reporting requirement. Your name, the quantity, the details of the transaction, all of it going to authorities. This type of reporting already exists for multiple handgun sales in many states, but applying it to ammunition at the federal level is unprecedented. So what would this actually look like if it became law? Let's walk through the practical reality. Online ammunition dealers would need to obtain federal licenses. The cost, paperwork, and compliance requirements associated with that licensing would likely drive many smaller retailers out of business entirely. The ones that survive would need to fundamentally restructure their operations. Buyers would need to physically show up somewhere with government identification before being allowed to purchase ammunition. For people who live in areas with limited retail options, this could mean significant travel. For people with mobility issues, this creates additional barriers. For anyone who values the privacy of their purchasing decisions, this eliminates that entirely. Large ammunition purchases, and again we're talking about quantities that many consider completely normal, would trigger federal and state reporting obligations. You'd essentially be flagged in a system simply for buying what you need. Here's a question that supporters of this legislation haven't adequately answered. How would this work across state lines? Online retailers in one state shipping to buyers in another state is the norm right now. Would every single transaction suddenly require physical presence? Who bears the cost of that logistical nightmare? Who bears the burden of compliance? These aren't hypothetical concerns. They're serious practical questions that haven't been addressed. In press statements announcing the reintroduction of this bill, the sponsors have framed it as a response to public safety concerns. Congresswoman Watson Coleman stated that regulating online ammunition sales is a common-sense step to counter mass shootings and protect families. She said that public safety must come before convenience. Congressman Mfume echoed similar sentiments, framing the legislation as a response to what he called the ongoing crisis of mass shootings and ammunition falling into the wrong hands. These are the talking points you'll hear repeatedly: public safety, common sense safeguards, closing loopholes. But here's what's worth examining. Is there actually evidence that online ammunition sales have contributed significantly to the problems being cited? The framing assumes a connection that hasn't been clearly established. It treats the convenience of legal purchasers as the problem, rather than addressing the actual individuals who commit violent acts. There's also a constitutional dimension to this conversation that the sponsors seem to be sidestepping entirely. The right to keep and bear arms, which is explicitly protected, arguably extends to the ammunition that makes those arms functional. Treating ammunition purchases as inherently suspicious, creating reporting mechanisms that flag ordinary buyers, and eliminating convenient access all raise serious questions about whether this approach respects constitutional boundaries. Here's what this really comes down to. This bill would fundamentally overhaul how ammunition is sold nationwide. It would end most online ammunition sales as they currently exist. It would impose reporting requirements that would turn ordinary bulk purchasers into de facto reportable transactions. And it would expand federal regulatory reach into a market that has historically remained relatively unregulated. The commerce of ammunition in the United States has been treated differently from the commerce of firearms for a reason. Ammunition isn't a firearm. Even large quantities of it have not traditionally required the same face-to-face verification or licensing regime. This legislation wants to change that equation entirely. It wants to treat ammunition more like guns. That's not just a regulatory shift. It's a legal and cultural shift with far-reaching implications. For anyone who buys ammunition online, who reloads, who stockpiles for training or defense, this legislation directly targets how you've been operating. It's not hypothetical. It's not theoretical. It's a specific proposal with specific provisions that would specifically impact your ability to purchase ammunition the way you currently do. Whether this particular bill advances or stalls, the strategy behind it continues. Bills like this get reintroduced, support gets measured, and foundations get laid for future pushes. The question isn't just whether this passes today. It's whether the groundwork being established now leads to passage tomorrow. If you're in a state represented by either of the co-sponsors, reaching out matters. Letting representatives know where constituents stand on specific legislation is how the process works. Engagement at the local level, through advocacy organizations, through direct communication, that's what shapes whether bills like this gain momentum or lose it. This is one to watch closely. The implications are too significant to ignore. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.